This analysis video is for Jeremy. Jeremy, thanks for sending all your swings. We're going to spend most of it looking at the wedges, but I just wanted to kind of touch on what we talked through Skype and on the phone yesterday. So continuing to work on the backswing, because as we'll see from this face on, the bracing, the arm extension, the exit path, the release is looking a lot more solid. So I think that avoiding getting the path too much in to out is now kind of your highest priority, because it looks like you're getting better club face control. So if we go back to the backswing, the takeaway, and kind of the top of the swing, and I'm not sure I did the best job of explaining over the phone, but it seemed like you were able to kind of pick on it and pick up what I was talking about. Basically what's happening in your takeaway is it's a little bit more of this right arm bending and the wrist actually flexing, so that the club is actually coming away in a little bit more of a closed and in position, as opposed to having the forearms rotate a little bit more and having the hands kind of work around. I'll show you with Sergio, Ricky Fowler, Adam Scott, kind of what I'm talking about. So here we can see it with the 4-iron even a little bit more exaggerated, and that's what gets the club inside the hands. What we would actually want to have happen is if this right arm stays a little bit longer, then the hands would be slightly lower, and they would and if you rotated your forearms, it wouldn't actually move it here, because what would end up happening is your body pivot and the way that your left shoulder would stay a little bit more connected would cause the hands to work more straight out towards this camera, as opposed to wrapping around inside of you. And I kind of anticipated, because I let you know that that's something that could happen when you start getting the body to drive the takeaway. So now it's just kind of refocusing the arms on how to accept the energy from the body. But Adam Scott does this really well, but we'll look at a few of our normal models. So you'll see that the body is kind of driving it, and watch that right arm as it's compared to the shirt seam, and notice how it doesn't work in and around that right arm. So the only way that it could not work around that right arm and still get the club working on plane is to have the forearms and a little bit of the lead shoulder rotation. So that's what tends to get the club following more of that path, where it's a little bit outside the hands, where if that right arm comes across and that left arm really pinches across your body early, that's going to cause you to create some of this depth. Now here we have Ricky Fowler. So the last two, Ricky Fowler and Sergio, will do a good job of kind of demonstrating that right arm staying straight, but you can also see during the takeaway that right arm isn't really working across his shirt seam. So notice the spacing in that left arm. So if we go from here, you can see that during that takeaway, and as you get towards setting the club, that left arm is working kind of very much this way, that right elbow is working this way, and that's kind of what's creating the depth. So having more forearm rotation, shoulder rotation during that takeaway actually discourages the arm to kind of abduct or work across your body. So paying attention to those two references, again, that elbow to the shirt seam, you can see how during the takeaway he kind of maintains that distance. And now if you look at the left shoulder, you can see his comes a little bit more than Ricky Fowler's, which is why the club gets a little bit more inside, but not very drastic. And you can see how long he keeps that right arm straight, and therefore the only thing that would allow some of this club rotation would be the forearm rotation. So should help clean up with your distance wedges, allowing you to to not suck the club inside, and potentially make it easier to avoid diggy contact or too much leading edge. So we'll take a look at the distance wedges next. Okay, so what's normal in golf is as you work on something that will benefit one area of your game, it will negatively impact another. So part of the reason why you've lost a little bit of your wedge game is because your bracing has gotten much better these last few months. So I still think you can work on the same thing with the takeaway. You can see the club continuing to work kind of deep and inside, and so then when you do your little reroute move, it's a little bit more on the inside than I like to see. Now you do a really good job with your pivot to get it back and get the hands working well through the ball, but coming more from that inside could potentially give you some diggy turf contact, which I'm not a huge fan of for your distance wedges. What you'll see from here is that remnant or that bracing, where you can see that the upper body is a good bit behind the belt buckle, or shirt seams behind the belt buckle, and so that's giving you a little bit more shaft lean than you want. I don't want you to try to release the hand sooner to get rid of the shaft lean. Instead, if the upper body was a little bit more on top, let's just say that these two are a little bit more on top together, then that would take away some of the slack in the right arm, and so the hands would move back just slightly, and that's what would get you to use the bounce a little bit better. So we'll bring up a couple comparisons so you can visualize that axis tilt that we want to rotate around here for the distance wedge. Now I don't have as many distance wedges, so I'm going to have to use a couple different examples than we normally look at, but here on the left we have Graham McDowell, and on the right we have Graham McDowell with the driver. And I just want you to see the difference in kind of pivot, axis tilt, bracing strategies. So you'll see over here on the left, there's no real pushback of the upper body. Like if you had a line there, you'll tend to see that it just kind of posts up and then just kind of casually coasts through, where with the driver, with the longer clubs, you will see a very pronounced bracing move in order to delay the arm timing but still have a shallow angle of attack. So we get it in a slightly different way with the distance wedges, where we want that right arm kind of getting closer to fully long, and the only way that can happen is if your upper body is more on top of your lower body. Here's Luke Donald, another good example. Tend to see a little bit of that bracing. He's more of an early extender, so he's not the best, but he is a world-class wedge player. And you'll see how much he tends to get that upper body on top of the lower body. So subtle difference. Let me see if I've Luke Donald driver. Yeah, so this may be a little bit better comparison. I'm not quite sure what shot he was hitting. But you'll see that upper body brace, that lower body brace, as he's going through that release and delivery position, where over here on the left, you'll see that upper body just kind of coast forward as the right arm fully lengthens through the shot. And so as a result, when we get him pretty much at impact, you'll see there's a little bit of shaft lean, but if we take his driver back compared to his body, you can see that there's kind of, if the left arm is more in this line, you can see that there's still some retained lag. If the left arm's more in this line, you can see a little bit, but it's less. That's kind of the overall goal, is if the upper body is more on top, then the right arm will have to extend earlier in order to get turf contact. But it kind of unloads all your levers as you're getting into the ball. So tends to create better bounce and leading trail edge contact with the turf, which it sounds like you're struggling on. So take a look at this, put in a few practice sessions, let me know how it works out. Especially, I'm less concerned about the wedges. I think that'll come back pretty quickly. More just want to keep moving and keep focusing on the takeaway and the arm path, and you're going to get it by having a little bit more of that arm rotation in the takeaway instead of sucking the hands in, closing that left shoulder, and really bringing, potentially closing the club face. So hopefully that makes sense, but let me know if you have any questions. I should be back up in a normal kind of setting here in about a week. So thanks for bearing with me during this little transition.